Right, we're good to go right now. Right. So today we're going to discuss about this LKS 32 classification of financial liability and an equity. Right. How to classify uh, particular instrument as a liability or an equity, because you know that both are similar type, same the nature of the instrument is little bit looks like the same, right? Both are the obligations kind of we have. So how to differentiate a liability and equity? So this is given in the LKS 32 standard. That standard says when you classify particular financial instrument as a financial liability or equity instrument, you want to look at its substance in the sense the practical ability or the practical reality of this particular instrument, right? That means now we'll say if you have a particular contractual obligation to transfer at the end of the particular period, that means at the end of the period you have a contractual obligation to pay to the other party, right? So we consider that as a critical feature for this classification. Accordingly, we identify that if any financial instrument creates contractual obligation to deliver cash, deliver other kind of financial assets to the holder, we consider that as a liability, right? On the other hand, if there is no contractual obligation or to transfer or deliver the cash to the other party, we consider that as equity. Understood the basis, right? The basis says if you have a contractual obligation to settle something, it is a liability. If it is not, you can consider that as an equity instrument, right? Remember, now we'll say for an example, right? Before come to this, we'll take for an example a liability. Now assume I'm taking a bank loan today, right? Which means I need to pay it back. So I have to classify that as a liability. The reason is today I have a contractual obligation to pay that. And also you have heard about preference shares. What do you mean by preference shares? Varaniya kotas. It is also like a loan that we taken from the shareholders, because not like ordinary shares, preference shares we need to pay back to the shareholders, preference shareholders, right? So we call that kind of instrument as an we should classify that kind of instrument as a liability. The reason is preference shares we should pay them back in a day. So we have a contractual obligation today, so we consider that as a liability rather than classify them as the equity. I think you may have heard about different categories of the preference shares, right? Some we call redeemable preference shares. Some we call non-redeemable preference shares. What is the meaning of redeemable preference shares and non-redeemable preference shares? Redeemable preference shares in the sense when we are taking the money from the shareholders, preference shareholders, we specify that I will give you or I will pay you this money after 5 years. That means after 5 years I need to redeem these shares. We call it redeemable preference shares, right? So that means today I have a contractual obligation to settle this liability after 5 years. Therefore, I should classify that preference shares under my long-term liabilities because I have a liability today, right? Okay, and tell me, there's another category of these preference shares called non-redeemable preference shares. What do you mean by non-redeemable preference shares? When we take in the shares or when we take in the money from those shareholders to the company, we say to the shareholder, we say to the preference shareholders, look at this, these are non-redeemable, we don't know when to pay. That means today I don't have a contractual obligation to pay, where I can classify non-redeemable preference shares under equity. The reason is today I don't have a contractual obligation to settle that. Are you clear how we differentiate? If we have redeemable preference shares, we'll say in 5 years or in 3 years, I need to pay back that shares to the shareholders or preference shareholders. Therefore, I classify them as redeemable preference shares. That is a one story. The other story is non-redeemable preference shares. That means when I'm taking the money from the shareholders, I'm saying that I don't know when I'm going to pay you back. So I don't have current contractual obligation to settle it. So I should, even though it's a preference shares, I should classify them under the equity. The reason is I don't have a current or the present obligation, liability to settle that today. So remember, critical feature of a liability is obligation to transfer economic benefit. There should be obligation to transfer economic benefits. Understood? There should be obligation to transfer economic benefit. If you have any obligation to transfer the economic benefits, yes, you should classify them under the liability. If not, you can classify them as equity instruments. Right? Are you clear now? So what do you want to do? Look at the substance of that transaction and see, do I have obligation to settle this? Yes. Then classify them under the liability. Do you have the obligation to settle this? No. Then you can classify them under the equity. Also, standards say further, if the instrument will pay, look at this. Sometimes there may be some kind of arrangements like this. Right now, a company has, so tell me, now one company is issuing, then another company debenture issue කරලා තියෙන. හරි, company එක debenture issue කරලා. Okay, we have issued debentures. So it is a liability for me, isn't it? Because I'm agreeing you to pay this debenture after 5 years. So today I have an obligation to settle this. Clear? Right. I should classify that as a liability in my books of account. In the debenture agreement itself, it says, okay, we are going to give, now we need to redeem these debentures after 5 years. No, we are saying we are giving you options. One option is, okay, after 5 years, you can take cash and go home. That is one option. Second option, I am saying, we are giving our own shares. That means we are issuing our company shares instead of this liability. Then you can become not a debt holder, you can become a shareholder of the company. Understood? That is also possible. We are saying that our debenture value is 100 rupees today. I am going to give you 5 shares for these 100 debentures. Likewise, I can trade off this debenture transaction with shares. I can give shares, right? That sort of arrangements are there. But remember, if the arrangement is set like this way, that means now, say for an example, I am in agreement because I have issued some debentures and I am telling to the shareholders, look at this, at the end of the period, right? At the end of the period, I am going to give you fixed number of ordinary shares. That means now we'll say my debenture value is 100 rupees. I am saying that after 5 years, I am going to give you 5 ordinary shares of my company for each 100 rupees. There I have agreed you to pay fixed number of ordinary shares, isn't it? I am agreed to give you fixed number of ordinary shares of 5. Also, I can say in the agreement, I am saying that now we have issued these debentures. You are the debenture holders. At the end of the period, at the end of the 5-year period, I will look into the market price of the shares, and depending on that, I will give you a particular number of equity shares. In first instance, what I agree, I will give you 5 equity shares for each 100 rupees debenture you have. But in the second instance, I am saying I am going to give you such number of shares. I am not fixing that. Variable number of shares based on the market price available at the end of the 5th year. Clear the 2 instances. So standard say, if you agree to standard says if you agrees to settle the particular liability by issuing fixed number of ordinary shares, right? By issuing fixed number of ordinary shares, you can classify them under equity. And if you are going to settle this particular liability by issuing variable number of shares, then you need to classify that as equity. Understood? If you are going to issue fixed number of ordinary shares, fixed number of equity shares, equity instrument of your own to settle this particular liability, then you have to classify them that as equity. And if you going to settle this liability by issuing variable number of your own equity shares, then you should classify them as liability. Understood? That's what this part say, right? Further, if the instrument will or may be settled in the issuer's own equity instrument, which on a non-derivative, that includes no contractual obligation for the issuer to deliver variable number of its own equity instruments, will also considered to be equity instrument. Remember here what it says, no contractual obligation. If there's no contractual obligation for the issuer to deliver variable number of its own equity, that means you have to classify them under the equity because it says it's fixed numbers. Understood? Right. So remember, this is also given in the standard. You want to keep this in mind. Never this has been tested in your examination, and there's a high tendency or high chance to test this at the examination to see whether particular instrument is going to be classified as equity or a debt under LKS 32. So the key thing that you want to keep it in mind, if you have a present obligation, current obligation to settle the particular liability, you have to classify them under the liabilities. But if you don't have any present obligation to settle particular liability or a particular settle financial instrument, you can classify that under the equity. And there's another instrument or the instance given in the standard. It says that you are going to settle particular liability by issuing your own equity number of shares that is fixed, that is going to be settled through the fixed number of shares, then it is equity. If it is not the fixed number of shares, if it is variable number of shares, it has to be considered as the liability. සමහරලාට මෙහෙම පුළුවන්. ඒ කියන්නේ දැන් පුතා උදාහරණයක් විදිහට අපි මෙහෙම හිතමු. කම්පැනි එක ඉෂුව කරන බොන්ඩ් එකක්. හොද්දට මතක තියාගන්න මේ ටර්ම්ස් හරිද? කම්පැනි එක ඉෂුව කරනවා බොන්ඩ් එකක් කියන්නේ අපිනේ බොන්ඩ් එක ඉෂුව කරන්නේ. ඒ කියන්නේ අපි ඉන්වෙස්ට් කරනවා නෙමෙයි. අපි මේ බොන්ඩ් එක ඉෂුව කරලා පාටිසිපන්ට්ස් ලට කියනවා සල්ලි දීලා ගන්න මේ අපි ඉෂුව කරන එක. That we call we issue the bonds. So company's point of view, it's a liability. The reason is why we issue the bonds. We are the one who issue the bonds. It's a liability for the company. Shareholder or the people, those who have the excess money, they will invest money in our. They will invest in the money in our company's bonds, right? For their point of view, it is an asset. But my point of view, it is a liability. Assume that we have issued a bond. Bond එකක් කියන්නේ මොකද්ද? පොඩි කාලයකට නෙමෙයි අවුරුදු 10කට විතර ලෝන් එකක් දෙනවට තමයි අපි සාමාන්‍යයෙන් කියන්නේ bond එකක් issue කරනවා කියලා. So I have issued the bond. There I have then සාමාන්‍ය bond එකක් මම issue කරොත් I should classify them under the liability in the bond paper. I am saying after 10 years we are going to settle this. That means we have a contractual obligation. Technically we should classify this under the liability. But remember, in the agreement itself, it says, if we say, look at this, we are issuing this bond today, we are going to redeem this at the end of the 10th year. But how? We are going to issue fixed number of ordinary shares to you. So if that is the case, that bond should classify under equity. The reason is, we are going to settle this particular bond after 10 years by giving fixed number of ordinary shares. So there you can't classify them under the liability. There you should classify that under the equity. The reason is we are going to settle this liability after 5th years or at the end of the 10th year. So technically it has to be a contractual, it has to be a equity rather than a contractual liability. Clear? So that depends that you want to determine, right? Okay. So shall we look into this question? Question number 10. Coaster wishes to purchase a new ride of Animation Galaxy theme park, but requires extra funding. Right? Coaster is a company. They wanted to have a particular we'll say a carnivals වගේ තියෙන තැනක් Animation Galaxy එකක් ඔය කොහෙද අපේ කොළඹ තියෙන්නේ Excel word කියලා දන්නවනේ අර බූල ගහන්න පුළුවන් එක එක දේවල් තියෙන්නේ, right? Theme park but requires extra funding. On 30th September 2018, Coaster issued the following preference shares. Look at this. They have issued preference shares. Issue කරලා තියෙන preference shares. The preference shares issue කරලා තියෙනවා කියන්නේ අපිට liability එකක්, right? First one, 1 million preference shares. දැන් ඔයා දන්නවා by virtue නේ මේක දැක්ක ගමන්ම ඔයා හිතනවා right, okay, 1 million preference shares. 1 million preference shares නම් preference shares නේ. Technically it has to be classified as liability කියලා ඉන්නවා. So 1 million preference shares for rupees 3 each. No dividend is payable. We are not going to pay the dividend. Entity will redeem the preference shares in 3 years time by issuing ordinary shares. So how they are going to settle this after 3 years? By issuing our own ordinary shares worth of 3 million. 3 million වටින ordinary shares තමයි දෙන්නේ. Right? The exact number of ordinary shares issuable will be based on their fair value on 30th September 2021. We don't know how many number of shares going to be issued, but we know that we are going to issue 3 million rupees worth of shares. That is the first scenario. Second scenario, 2 million preference shares for 2.8 each, no dividends payable. The preference shares will be redeemed in 2 years time by issuing 3 million ordinary shares. අපි මේකත් settle කරනවා අවුරුදු දෙකකින්. කොහමද? 3 million ordinary shares issue කරලා. There we are not specifying particular amount. There we specify particular number of shares. Third one, 4 million preference shares for 2.50 each. They are not mandatorily redeemable. A dividend is payable if and only if the dividend are paid on the ordinary shares. Now you want to classify these three into whether you should classify the first preference shares as equity or debt or the liability. Second, equity or liability. Yes, your answers are correct. Hopefully everyone should understand. Okay, now when you're writing this as the answer, what do you want to tell, right? As spell case, look at this. 1 million preference shares, the first one. As spell case 32, financial liabilities, any contract that may be settled in the entity's own equity instruments and is a non-derivative. ඔය වචන තේරෙන්නේ නැතුයි non-derivative කියන එක, right? Non-derivative for which the entity is obliged to deliver variable number of it on equity shares. Therefore, contract that requires the entity to deliver as many of the entity's own equity instruments are equal in value to certain amount should be treated as the debt. Therefore, you should classify this under the liability. That is your answer. Entity must redeem the first set of preference shares by issuing ordinary shares equal to value of 3 million. Rupees 3 million received from the preference shares should be classified as liability in the statement of. Right? So, to settle it anyway, that you need to classify as equity. Right? So those are the answer for the 3. So you have to write this kind of a detailed answer in the answer paper because you have the standard book. Highlight the standard book with this specific paragraph. Then you can start with that. එක තමයි ඔය practice කරන්න ඕනේ මේ දවස් ටිකේ කොහොමද answer එක ලියන්නේ. ඉස්සෙල්ලාම කියන as per LKS 32 it defined like this because ඔයා මෙහෙම කියන්න ඕනේ as per equity, as per standard, equity and liabilities are 2 types, equities this much. Even ලියන්න කිව්වොත් එහෙම ලකුණු දැන් අපි හිතමු මේ question එකට දීලා තියෙනවා කියලා ලකුණු 5 marks. 5 marks in the sense the maximum time that you can spend is 5 multiplied by 1 into 8. ඒ කියන්නේ 1.8. ඒ කියන්නේ අපි නිකමට ගමු 2 minutes කියලා එක question එකකට. එහෙනම් you have to write and manage your answer within 10 minutes. ඕක ඔයා ආන්සර් එක ලිව්වත් ඔයාටත් යනවා 10 minutes. මම ආන්සර් එක ලිව්වත් මටත් යනවා 10 minutes. ඒ කියන්නේ මගේ writing speed එක writing skill එක develop නම් අපි දෙන්න අතර විනාඩි 2-3ක difference එකක් තියෙයි, but still we have a maximum number of words that we can write within 10 minutes time. ඒක examiner ලිව්වත් එයාට ලියන්න පුළුවන් එක වචන ගානක් තියෙනවා මේක ඇතුලේ. Right? Only thing we should practice and we should reduce the unnecessary things. Like now, if you look at the the answer for the first question, you can see here. අපි පටන් ගන්න තියෙන්නේ as per LKS 32. ඕම පටන් ගත්ත financial instrument can be either a equity instrument or a debt instrument. What is equity instrument? ඕමල කියලා ලියන්න ගියොත් එහෙම you are not getting the සමහරලාට ඔයගේ time එක exceed වෙයි ඔයා උත්තරේ ලියන්න ඕනි තැනට වෙනකොට. So directly start with that because you know what is the answer. Based on that you want to create your answer, right? You can see and go directly see when you are issuing your own equity number of shares, right? Fixed number of your own equity shares, it has to be considered as equity. So therefore you can see as per the question they are going to issue fixed number of ordinary shares or variable number of ordinary shares. Accordingly you have to classify this as equity or classify this as liability. Likewise you can write your answer. Remember to limit your answer within the time that have been allocated to you, right? Okay, so these are the answer for these 3 questions. I think that is clear. And last thing that we want to discuss here, interest, dividend and losses and the gains. You know that now tell me, company has we'll say a company has ordinary shares. For ordinary shares holders we pay dividend, isn't it? Yes. Where we show that dividend payment? Under what? Where we show that dividend payment?
Retained earnings.
Yes, under retained earnings you deduct and show that as a dividend expense. That means you show that under the equity. ඒ කියන්නේ අපි පෙන්නන්නේ කොහෙද retain earning එකෙන් අඩු කරලානේ පෙන්නන්නේ dividend ගෙවද්දි නේද? Retain earning එක කොහෙද තියෙන්නේ? Under equity. හරි. Assume that you have debentures where you classify that in the financial statement. Debenture. Debenture where we classify in the balance sheet.
Non-current liabilities.
Under non-current liabilities. For debenture holders, what we pay for them as the return? For debenture holders, what's in the financial statements? Where we show this interest expense?
Under finance expense.
Under finance expense, correct. Under finance expense. Can you remember now can you identify the particular pattern? If you have any equity, dividend also you pay if you pay dividends to the equity holders, that is also you showed under the equity. If you classify something under the or the liabilities, you record the corresponding expense in the P&L. If it is equity, you have to record the particular expense also under the equity. If it is liability, that has to be considered as an expense in the P&L. Okay, now tell me, we have preference shares, redeemable preference shares. That means after 3 years, I am going to redeem that preference shares. Where should I classify that particular redeemable preference shares in the balance sheet? Equity under non-current liability. The reason is I have a current obligation to settle it there. Now, for the preference shareholders, we pay dividend. Where we should classify that?
Profit or loss statement.
Under finance cost in the P&L. The reason is why we classify the liability. We classify particular instrument under liability, so expense should be recognized in the P&L. If we classified something in the equity, we should classify them under the equity. The expense, corresponding expense also should be classified under the equity. Okay, now tell me, company has issued preference shares, non-redeemable preference shares, where we should classify that particular financial instrument, where we should classify under equity or liability?
Equity.
Under equity. Now we pay the dividend for them, where we should show the dividend payment? Here, where we should show the dividend payment? Under equity. The reason is we classify the particular instrument under equity, the payment also should be recorded in the equity, right? I think you cleared that, right? That's what it says: interest, dividends, losses and gains. The accounting treatment of interest, dividend, losses and gains related to the financial instrument follows the treatment of the instrument itself. Dividend paid in respect of preference shares classified as liability will be regarded as finance expense in the profit or loss. Dividend paid on shares classified as equity will be reported in the statement of changes in equity. Understood? You understood how we should follow that rule. Remember that, right? So you can trace it when you are referring financial instruments. Are you clear about that? හරිද? ඔයා annual report එකක් එහෙම බැලුවොත් පේ ඉතින් කොහොමද ඔයා classify කරලා තියෙන්නේ? ඒගොල්ලන්ගේ dividends දාලා තියෙන්නේ equity එක ඇතුළේද එහෙම නැත්නම් expense එකක් ඇතුළේවද දාලා තියෙන්නේ කියලා. Hope that part is clear. The topic that we're going to discuss is compound financial instrument. Compound in the sense this is called a hybrid financial instrument. Compound. Two things is there. I told you an example earlier. Some organization are issuing bonds. මොනවද issue කරන්නේ? bonds. හරිද? bond එකක් කියන්නේ long term loan එකක් විතර, right? Okay. So compound financial instrument කියන්නේ මම කියවනේ දැන් සමහර companies තියෙනවා business කරගෙන යන්න සල්ලි මොදි පොඩි සල්ලි ප්‍රශ්න තියෙනවා. ඒගොල්ලෝ කරනවා දැන් කොහොමද ණයක් ගත්තොත් මෙහෙමයි ණයක් ගන්න පුළුවන්. I can take a loan. Only thing is how can I pay this in short run? හෙට අනිද්දා නම් ගෙවා ගන්න බැරි වෙයි. උන් අවුරුදු 10කට විතර loan එකක් දුන්නොත් නම් I am preferred. අන්න එහෙම තියෙන companies තියෙන්න පුළුවන්. So they are issuing bonds. But what happened after 10 years? Company says like, okay, issue කරනකොට කියනවා මෙහෙමයි අපි මේක අවුරුදු 10කට for 10-year loan, 10-year bond. But at the end of the 10th year, we will give you an option. Either you can take money and go, or else we will give our company's own shares. Understood? That option is there. Either you can consider this as, either you can take the money, අපි සල්ලි දෙන්නම් වාගේ අතට, or else at the end of the period you can convert this into number of share, ordinary shares. Right? So we call that sort of financial instrument as compound financial instrument. දැන් අර ඉස්සලා equity එකයි liability එකයි එක පටල ගන්න එපා. එතනදී අපි කරන්නේ මොනවද? මම කියනවා option එකක් නෙමෙයි දෙන්නේ. I am saying that at the end of the period I will give you fixed number of ordinary shares or variable number of. That is a mandatory condition. But here in compounding financial instrument, what will happen? In a compounding financial instrument, what will happen? You need to consider, there's an option, right? Option given by the issuer. Either you can convert this into ordinary shares or else you can take the money. That option is given. So then you need to classify them under the compound financial instrument, which is a liability. Right? So you can identify this kind of financial instrument includes a liability component and equity element also. That's why we call this as a hybrid instrument. Because some instance, අවුරුදු 10ක් ගියාට පස්සේ මේක liability එකක් වෙන්නත් පුළුවන්, මේක equity එකක් වෙන්නත් පුළුවන්. Two parts are there. And also මෙහෙම වෙන්නත් පුළුවන්. අපි හිතමුකෝ අපි bonds 100ක් issue කරා. මේ 100ෙන් ගත්ත ඔක්කොම මේ option එක use කරන්නේ නැති වෙන්න පුළුවන් option. Some can use, some may not use. If that is the case, ඔයාට දැම්ම හිතා ගන්න ඕනේ මේක equity ද දාන්නේ liability ද දාන්නේ. Standard gives you an option. We identify these kind of financial instrument as compound financial instrument, hybrid financial instruments, and you want to taken out the liability part and the equity part separately and account for it. අපි ඒක බලමු මේ question එකේ. Right? Question number 11. Okay, read the question number 11. On 1st January 2018, Daniel issued in the sense, Daniel's point of view, it's a liability, 50 million 3-year convertible bond at par. Remember, they are issuing 50 million 3-year convertible bond at par value එකටමයි. කියන්නේ 50 million වටින එකක් 50 billion එකටමයි දෙන්නේ. Can you remember last week we discussed 50 million worth of loan has given for 45. If that is the case, we call that it has given with a discount. ඊට පස්සේ අපි ගත්ත maturity එකේදී 50 නෙමෙයි දෙන්නේ 55 දෙනවා. එතකොට අපි කියවා එක premium එකකුත් එක්ක. Likewise, here what they have done, 50 million worth of asset has issued to the 50 million. ඒ කියන්නේ මෙහෙම තියනවා නේ පුතා. දැන් සමහරලාට අපි හිතමු මගේ ගාව කාර් එකක් තියෙනවා. දැන් මේ කාර් එක විකුණ ගන්න ඕනේ. කාර් එක විකුණනකොට මම කියනවා මේ කාර් එක 5 million වටිනවා. 5 million කාර් එක වටිනවා කියලා කියනකොට කවුරුත් ගන්න නැහැ. එතකොට මම මොකද කරන්නේ? ඩිස්කවුන්ට් එකක් දීලා ඒක දෙනවා. එතකොට ගන්නවා. නැත්තම් සමහර කාස් තියෙනවා 5 million කිව්වම 5 million එකට නෙමෙයි මට 6 million විතර විකුණ ගන්න පුළුවන්. මම ඒ වගේ වෙලාවට ඒක මේ මොනවද? ඒක අපි හිතමුකෝ කාර් දැන් මේ දවස්වල කාර් එකක් ගත්තොත් ඕඩර් කාර් එකක් මාකට් ප්‍රයිස් එකට වඩා වැඩිපුර යනවා. රීසන් is demand එක අඩුයි. කාර් අඩුයි. ඉතින් කාර් එකක් ගන්න කවුරු හරි කැමති සල්ලි වැඩිපුර දීලා හරි ගන්න. අන්න ඒ වගේ මේ ඉන්ස්ට්‍රුමන්ට් එකත් එහෙමයි. මේ ඉන්ස්ට්‍රුමන්ට් එක මාරු. හරියට දැන් අපි හිතමුකෝ අපි මෙහෙම කියනවා. අපි කියනවා මේ මොනවද? මොන්ටේරෝ එකක් දෙනවා 5 million වලට. මොන්ටේරෝ එකක් 5 million එකට දෙනවා කියන්නේ it's a වඩාද ලොටරි වගේනේ නේද? ඇයි මොන්ටේරෝ එකක් 5 million එකට කොහොමත් ගන්න බෑ. මොන්ටේරෝ එකක් කියන්නේ perfect නේ. අපි ඒකේ comfortableness, safety, everything is there. අන්න ඒ වගේ instruments උත් තියෙනවා. ඒ වගේ attract මේ instrument එක ගත්තොත් I can get good return and I can sell even at any time. ඕන වෙලාවෙ විකුණන්නත් පුළුවන්. අන්න එහෙම features තියෙනවා නම් sometime you can use at a premium or sometime you can use at the par value එකටම විකුණනවා දෙනවා. Because there are lots of demand for that. There were no issue cost, right? Issue cost එකක් නැල්ලු. Coupon rate is 10%. We know that, right? Coupon interest rate in the sense, the nominal interest rate. Actually what we received at the end of the period. Money that we received. That we need to pay in this Daniel's point of view. Because it's a liability for his point of view. He need to pay 10% interest. Cash interest දෙන්න ඕනේ. Payable annually in arrears on 31st December. That is at the end of each period. The bond is redeemable at par on 1st January 2021. මේක redeem කරන්නේත් par value එකටමයි 50ටමයි. ඒ කියන්නේ මේක මේ instrument එකට ලොකු ඉල්ලමකුත් නැහැ පොඩි ඉල්ලමකුත් නැහැ නේද? It has the sufficient demand and supply 50ටම දෙනවා. Right? That is there. So there is no any discount or any premium, isn't it? Yes. Bond holders, look at this. Bond holders ගන්න මනුස්සයාට may opt for conversion. Opt කියලා කියන්නේ they have option for conversion in the form of shares. You can convert these shares, these bond into shares. The terms of conversion are 25 cents equity shares for every 1 rupee owned. ඒ කියන්නේ මේ 50 million නේ. එතකොට මං හිතමු එක bond share holder කෙනෙක් 1 million bond එකක් ගත්ත කියලා 50 million නේ මෙයා issue කරන්නේ. එක shareholder කෙනෙක් එක මිනිස්සෙක් 1 million ගන්නවා මේ 50 million. එතකොට එයාට තියෙනවා 1 million. එහෙනම් හැම එක රුපියලකටම 725 shares දෙකක් හම්බ වෙනවා. That's how it goes, right? Or to each bond holders on 1st January 2021, bonds issued. Look at this. This is very important one. Bond issues by similar entities without any conversion option rights currently bear the interest at 15%. හරිද? ඒ කියන්නේ මෙහෙම කතාවක් කියනවා. එයා කියනවා දැන් මාකට් එකේ මේ වගේ තව බොන්ඩ්ස් තියෙනවා. මේ වගේ තව බොන්ඩ්ස් තියෙනවා මාකට් එකේ. හැබැයි ඒවට කන්වර්ෂන් ඔප්ෂන් නැහැ. ඒ කියන්නේ මේ වගේ වාට ෂෙයාර්ස් දෙන්නේ. අන්න ඒ වගේ අපි හිතමු එහෙම ෂෙයාර් ඔප්ෂන් නැති ඒ කියන්නේ ෂෙයාර්ස් වලට කන්වර්ට් කරන්න නැති තියෙන බොන්ඩ්ස් තියෙන්නේ. අන්න ඒවට සාමාන්‍යයෙන් ඉන්ට්‍රස්ට් රේට් එක 15% ගෙවනවා. ඇයි අපිට පොඩි හින්ට් එකක් දෙන්න. ඒ කියන්නේ හින්ට් එකක් නෙමෙයි. අපිට මෙතන කැල්කියුලේෂන් එකේදී මේක use කරන්න පුළුවන්. The reason is දැන් සාමාන්‍යයෙන් මේ වගේ instruments වලට conversion option එකක් නැහැ නේ. right? අපි බලනවා මේ වගේ debt instrument එකකට conversion option එකක් නැත්තම් if we don't have any conversion option, what is the rate? Normally market attracts මේකට එමත් තියෙනවානේ. අන්න එහෙනම් අපි බලනවා මෙතනදී ඒක අපි use කරනවා discounting factor එක විදිහට. You will learn this little bit later. හරිද? සමහර දේවල් දැන් ඔයාලට මම කලිනුත් එහෙම කියවනේ සමහර දේවල් චුට්ටක් කරගෙන යද්දි තමයි තේරෙන්නේ because you need to have some sort of practical knowledge about this debt instrument changes as well. හරිද? ඔයාලා ඒ කියන්නේ මම දැන් ඒ කියන්නේ මම KPMG කේ work කරලා then I joined with an entity which engage into this, we call that sort of entities as investment banks. Investment bank එකක් කියන්නේ මේ, it's not like a normal bank. සාමාන්‍ය අපි bank එකක් කියන්නේ people's bank. ඒ වගේ banks නෙමෙයි investment banks කියන්නේ. Investment banks are also financial intermediaries. හරිද? ඔයාලට එහෙම හොයාගන්න පුළුවන්. investment banks තියෙනවා. කියන්නේ හැම මෙහෙමත් තියෙනවා. හැම බැංකුවක් ඇතුළෙම investment bank unit එකක් වෙනම තියෙනවා. treasury unit එක කියලා කියන්නේ. It is a financial intermediary. ඒ කියන්නේ මූල්‍ය අතරමැදිකරුවෙක්. Financial intermediary. Right? What that particular entity does, එයා කරන්නේ මොනවද දන්නවද? මාකට් එකේ සල්ලි තියන අයයි සල්ලි නැති අයයි එකතු කරලා දෙන එක. Now say for an example, මෙහෙම හිතන්නකෝ. We'll say People's Leasing Company. Now People's Leasing Company wants to issue debenture. People's Leasing Company wants to issue debenture. People's Leasing එකට only long term loan එකක් ගන්න. debenture issue කරලා. එතකොට People's Leasing එක මොනවද දන්නවද කරන්නේ? මේ වැඩේ බාර දෙනවා investment bank එකකට. එයා කියනවා investment bank එකකට දීලා මේ මට මේ debentures වගේ මට මේ සල්ලි වගේක් ඕනි කරලා තියෙනවා. ඔයාලට පුළුවන් ද මට මේ වැඩේ කරලා දෙන්න. ඒ කියන්නේ අඩු රේට් එකකට සල්ලි ටිකක් හොයලා දෙන්න. Because that investment bank has those the database. එයා ගාව තියෙනවා. සල්ලි තියන අයගේ database එක, සල්ලි නැති අයගේ ඕනි අයගේ database එක එයා ගාව තියෙනවා. එයා කියනවා right, okay, I will do that. Investment bank what they do, investment bank identify what are the requirement of the People's Leasing and tell for its clients, look at this, People's Leasing wants to have a debenture, they are going to issue debenture, will you invest in that? So එක මනුස්සයෙක් කියනවා yes, I will invest 500 million at 10%. තව එක්කෙනෙක් කියනවා okay, I will invest 100 million at 12%. අන්න එම ඒගොල්ලෝ කියනවා යා මම මෙච්චරක් ඉන්වෙස්ට් කරන්න මෙච්චරක්. ඊට පස්සේ මම ඒ ඔක්කොම එකතු කරලා average rate එකක් හදලා මම ඒක කියනවා කාටද? People's Leasing එකට look at this, averagely you can buy this loan but for 10.5%. So shall I arrange this? And it was People's Leasing එක agree වුණොත් investment bank do this transaction and they get a commission in fees which is their income. That's how it happened. එතකොට I got a chance to work this kind of investment banking. එතකොට මේ වගේ instruments තමයි ලොකුවටම deal කරේ. හරිද? ඒ නිසා තමයි මට practical knowledge එක තියෙනවා. ඒකයි මට මේක understand, but you may not having that knowledge for the time being. තාම නැතුව ඇති. ඉස්සරහට you can collect this information. The knowledge from your practical experience. But remember, that is the reason why some of the terms which is in here may not under. ඒකයි මම හැම වෙලාවෙම කියන්නේ මම මේක ක්ලාස් එකේ කරත් සමහරවිට තව ටිකකින් තේරෙයි කියන්නේ, because those kind of theoretical parts I am going to explain you through a question or an example. Then only you can understand it. සමහර දේවල් තියෙනවා. මේක මට කියවද්දි මට මේක තේරෙන්නේ practical sense එකකින්, but not for you all still. දැන් ඔයා මෙහෙමනේ මේ example එක කියවද්දි දැනට මේ question එකකින් ඔයාට තේරෙන්නේ නැත්තේ only the last line, but you know the other one, right? Because you learned that in the previous lesson. You know what is nominal value, you know that particular period, the nominal interest rate, par value, everything is you know, but you don't know this last line. That we'll learn as a new learning point. Anyway, just keep that in mind. We'll move into the other part. Now what we are going to do, now we are going to identify how much is the liability component included in this particular compound financial instrument and how much is the equity component or the equity element included in this. Why this is a hybrid security, right? How to take it out, that's what we are going to see, right? Okay, so what you want to do, first of all you can measure how much is the liability component. How to take that? දැන් ඔයා දන්නවා අපි මේ financial instrument එකක් නිගත්තේ. අපි දන්නවා මේ liability component එක අපි දැන් හොයන්න යන්නේ. මෙහෙම තමයි ගාන හදන්න කියන්නේ. මෙහෙම තමයි standard එක කියන්නේ. If you have any compound financial instrument, this is how you want to look at this. Because what do you mean by compound financial instrument? Compound financial instrument means it's include liability component as well as an equity component. So this is how you want to split liability component and the equity component. How to get the liability component? Standard එක කියන මෙහෙම කරන්නලු. දැන් ඔයා දන්නවා first year you need to pay interest of 5,000 because you know that how much is our the me question එක බැලුවොත් question එකේ විදිහට කොච්චරද අපේ instrument එකේ value එක 50 million instrument value is 50 million. එතකොට මම මේ 50 million cash ගන්නවනේ ඩැනියල් කරන්නේ මේක issue කරලා එයා සල්ලි ටික ගන්නවා 50 million. First year he need to pay interest of 10%. Second year he need to pay interest of 10%. Third year he need to pay interest of he needs to pay interest of 10%. That is 50 million into 10% කියන්නේ millions වලින් ගත්තොත් 5 we'll say 5 million. 5 million thousands වලින් ගත්තොත් 5000. 5000 පළවෙනි අවුරුද්දේ ගෙවන්න ඕනේ interest එක. දෙවෙනි අවුරුද්දේ interest එක ගෙවන්නත් ඕනේ 5000. third year එකේ interest එක ගෙවන්නත් ඕනේ 5000. third year එකේ end වෙද්දී 50 million ආයි ගෙවන්නත් ඕනේ. That's why we have taken these cash flows. First year you need to pay. At the end of the first year you need to pay 5000. Second year you need to pay 5000. Third year you need to pay 5000. And the third year also you need to pay 5000. This is 18, 90, 21. I think it should be 20. That's what I have taken. It should be 20. It is 21, right? It's 20. It should be 20. Right, it should be 20, right, because there is only three years, right? First end of the 31st December 2018, 31st December 2019, 31st December 2020, right? It should be 2020. Okay, right. So you can take the first year 5000, second year 5000, third year 5000, and you have you need to pay the principal amount on the 1st January, or we'll say 31st December 2020. 50,000. And here the question is silent on a discount factor, but it gives you an indication. If only these financial instrument trading in the market without conversion option, that has a 15% the return, which you can consider as the discounting factor here, and you take that as the discounting factor and you get the present value. At the end of the first year you need to pay 5,000, you get the present value. And 1 divided by 1.5 to the power of 2 at the second year, 1 divided by 1.5 to the power of 3 at the third year for both interest and the capital, right? And you take this total, we call this total as the liability component, which is 54,291.9 today. කවදට අපි මේක ගන්නේ? අදට. ඒ කියන්නේ 1st January 2018 වලට. Then we need to find out how much is the equity component. How to get that? You know that the nominal value of the share, the debenture is 50 million, right? From this 50 million, you should deduct the liability component value. Can you remember how we defined equity earlier? මතකද last time පටන් ගන්නකොට ඉස්සෙල්ලාම අපි ඉගෙන ගත්තා what is financial instrument, there should be a contract. Financial instrument are 3 types. එකක් financial asset, financial liability and equity instrument කියලා. equity එකේ මතකද මම ඔයාලට T account එකක් ගාලා balance sheet එකක් කියලා මම ඔයාලට පෙන්නුවේ. balance sheet එකේ assets ගත්තා, liabilities ගත්තා. මම ඊට පස්සේ ඔයාලගෙන් ඇහුවා මේ liabilities ටික asset එකෙන් අඩු කරාම residual balance part we call the equity කියලා. අන්නේ approach එක තමයි මෙතනත් use කරලා තියෙන්නේ. You take this liability, you take this total issue value, and from that you can take the liability component, the residual part, the balance part you have considered as the equity. මෙන්න මේ විදිහට තමයි අපි එතකොට මේ instrument එක recognize කරන්නේ. එතකොට කොහොමද අපි මේකට double entry දාන්නේ? දැන් ඩැනියල් මේ ටික issue කරාම මොකද වෙන්නේ? He received cash, isn't it? 50 million cash යාගේ අතට හම්බෙනවා. එතකොට යාගේ cash book එක debit වෙනවා 50 million. He should credit financial liability 44,291.1 and cash should credit 5,708.1. So this is how it has to be recognized, this kind of compound financial instrument. This is very famous popular question in your examination paper. They have tested this maybe 4 or 5 times in your past papers. ලේසිනේ හදන එක නේද? ඒගොල්ලෝ අහනවා මේක කොහොමද recognize කරන්න කියලා in the financial statements. Are you all clear? Right, okay. You can quickly note this down. I think question 11 should be in your tune. Can you you better to recognize this in this way first, and then you can note this down as well. Okay, quickly record this. if you're done, you can note it down this quickly. Now now this is now I think in your if you look at your study packs, this is how they have stopped this. And but I thought you to tell how we should recognize this later on also. Now you have a liability now. Now if you take this financial liability is 44,291,900, and you have your equity call 5,708.1. එහෙම දැන් account දෙක තියෙනවා. දැන් මේ දෙන්න මොකද වෙන්න ඕනේ? අවුරුදු 3 ඉවර වෙනකොට liability should reach to 5 million. isn't it? 5 million වෙන්න එපා liability එක. Then only අපි හිතමු we'll assume that no now when we recognize this at today, that is at the 1st January 2018, we put this double entry: cash book debit 50 million and financial liability credit and equity credit 5 million, assuming that this has conversion option. We'll say at the end of the period no one took this option, exercise this option. ඒගොල්ලෝ කියන අය පයවා අපිට සල්ලි දෙන්න කියලා. So we need to pay cash no. එතකොට අපි මොකද කරන්නේ? We should recognize that interest expense over the period of time. So this is how you should recognize this liability. So liability component you should recognize using the amortized cost. Now you know that in 2018 first year you have the opening balance of 44,291.9. You are using 15% discounting factor which you use to get the present value as the amortized factor. So EIR or IRR, and you multiply that by this amount, and you have to pay interest at the nominal rate of 5,000. Your closing balance is 45. Second year it become 47. Third year it become 50. ඔන්න දැන් ඔයාගේ liability component එක ඇවිල්ලා තියෙනවා third year එක වෙනකොට මොකද වෙන්නේ? liability component එක 50 million ඇවිල්ලා. දැන් ඔයාලට තේරෙයි දැන් බලයි මොකද මේ වෙලා තියෙන්නේ. දැන් your liability has a 50 million balance, equity has 5.7. The equity කියන්නේ අපි ඔක පෙන්නන්නේ කොහෙද? where we should then මෙන්න මේකේ double entry දැම්මොත් පුතා මෙන්න මේකේ double entry එක දැම්මොත් කොහෙද මේක පෙන්නන්නේ balance sheet එකේ? 44 million you should show under the long term liabilities or the non current liabilities. 5,708 where you should show. ඒක කොහෙද පෙන්නන්නේ? 5,708 එක where you should show that. It is equity no. එතකොට අපි equity කියලා පෙන්නන්නේ yes it is equity. කොහෙද දන්නවද පුතා එක පෙන්නන්නේ? දැන් equity statement එකේ ඉස්සලම තියෙන්නේ මොකද්ද? stated capital column එක. දෙවෙනියට තියෙන්නේ we'll say revaluation reserve. අන්න එහෙම තියෙනවා. තව column එකක් අපි දානවා. ඒක ලියනවා how we call it other component of equity. එහෙම තමයි අපි ලියන්නේ ඒකේ. other component of equity කියලා තමයි අලුත් line එකක් දානවා. ඒකේ ඔක්කොම දානවා. ඒකට other component of equity. මෙහෙමනේ සාමාන්‍යයෙන් in the first column we have equity capital, share capital. Second one we will say preference shares capital. Third one we'll say revaluation reserve. Then we have retained earnings. Likewise, we add a new column, and that column is named as other component of equity. Under that column, we can show this 5,000. Hari. Now the question is, what will we should do after the end or at the end of the third year? What we should do? දැන් අපේ entry එක ගත්තොත් එහෙනම් මොකද වෙලා තියෙන්නේ? දැන් third year එක අරගෙන බැලුවොත් එහෙම මේ 44,000 එක දැන් first මේ interest එක amortized cost එක ඇවිල්ලා this balance has become 50,000 now. මේක 50 million වෙලා තියෙනවා. මේක 5.7 million මේ account එකේ තියෙනවා. 50 million and 5.7 කියලා. දැන් මොකද කරන්නේ? දෙකේම තියෙනවානේ amount එක. Right? Yes, what you should do? අපි හිතමුකෝ everybody exercise this option. එහෙමනම් standard එක කියනවා මේම කරන්නලු. now දැන් ඔයාගේ equity එක තියෙනවානේ. ඔයා මෙහෙම කරන්න. මේ entry දැන් අයින් කරලා දාන්න එපා. ඔයා කරන්න ඕනේ. දැන් will assume that everybody exercise this option. කොහොමද exercise කරන්න කියලා කිව්වේ? if you go to the question you can see right. If you go to the question you can see the terms of conversion are 25 cents equity shares. 7.25 shares දෙකක් 2.25 cents fair for 1 rupee. එහෙනම් 1 රුපියලකට හම්බෙනවා 7.25 shares දෙකක්. ඒ කියන්නේ 7.50ක් නේ. 7.25 shares දෙකක් නේද හම්බෙනවා. ඒ කියන්නේ අපි බලන්න එහෙනම් 50 million divide by 50 cents නේද? එහෙමනේ ගන්න ඕනේ. right. එහෙම ගත්තට පස්සේ අපිට එනවා equity shares කොච්චරක්ද? right, the conversion terms are 2.25 cents equity shares for every one, therefore 100 million shares හම්බෙනවා අපිට නේ. කොහොමද අපි 100 million shares ගත්තේ? 50 million shares නේ. එතකොට එකකට හම්බෙනවනේ shares දෙකක්. එතකොට 100 million shares. එකක් 7.50යි. 7.25යි. ඒ කියන්නේ කොච්චරක්ද? 25 million rupees shares. අන්න එහෙමනේ හම්බෙන්නේ. එහෙනම් remaining 30 million should be classified as the share premium. ඒ කියන්නේ මෙතනදී කරන්න ඕනේ මෙහෙමයි. මේක ලංකාවේ මම නම් ඇත්තටම මේ වගේ question එක මම මේ ගත්තේ ACCA paper එකකින්. That's why we call it as the premium. ඒ කියන්නේ ඇත්තටම අපි කරන්න ඕනේ අර දැන් liability එක 0 කරන්න එපා. liability 0 කරන්න එපා because we have the liability. Liability should become 0. So liability debit 50 million. Other component of equity also we need to become 0 because there is no one called other component of equity. ඒකත් 0 කරනවා. ඒක credit කරන්න ඕනේ. අපි නිකන් හිතාගන්නකෝ ඔයාලා මෙච්චර වැඩි හිතන්න එපා. අපි මේක ක්‍රෙඩිට් කරන්නේ ෂෙයා කැපිටල් එකට. ලංකාවේ විදිහට මේ දෙන්නම ෂෙයා කැපිටල් එකට යන්න ඕනේ. ස්ටේට් කැපිටල් එකට මේක අපි දානවා. right, don't think about this share premium part. Credit share capital. ලංකාවේ share premium කියන එකක් නැහැ. Understood, right? Earlier we had අපි A level කරන කාලේ there was the concept called share premium. මොකද දන්නවද? ඔයාලගේ Companies Act එක මොකක්ද ඔයාලා learn කරන 7 of 2007 Companies Act. අපි ඉගෙන ගත්තේ A level කරද්දී අපි chartered කරද්දී 7 of 2007 තිබ්බා. අන්න ඔයාලට measure කරගන්න පුළුවන්. right, එතකොට A level කරද්දී අපි තිබ්බේ number 17 of 1982 Companies Act එක. හරිද? ඒකේ ඔය share premium discounts ඒවා තිබුණා, but not in the now case, the current case under the new standard. So you want to credit this to the share capital account. Clear how you have to do that, right? This is how මෙන්න මේ subsequent part එක නම් ඇත්තටම කියලා නෑ, but you should know how you have to do that. Are you clear how to do this and any clarification that I need to give you? Okay, so before we go to the impairment part, shall we do some of the past paper questions relating to this compound financial instrument? So this is 2015 December question number 3. Look at this, the entire question 10 marks is given for this financial instrument. Okay, some financial instrument contain elements of both liability and equity. LCase 32 financial instrument presentation requires segregating these two elements and disclosing them separately. Required. Explain the reason for separately identifying liability and equity element of compound financial instrument. ඇයි මේක මේ දෙකට කඩන්න ඕනි කියලා අහනවා. Why you should classify them into two? Equity, explain the reason for separately identifying the liability and the equity element of the compound financial instrument. Why we should classify that equity and liabilities. So why we should classify them? You know that in the first slide today we learned based on the substance we need to classify financial asset and the liability. If you look at the substance of this transaction, you know that at the end of the particular period, the users or the not the user, the holder of the financial instrument will get a chance to convert his liability into equity, right? So I told you right how we classify this. We took the future cash flows and get the present value. Also we get the residual value part for the equity. So why we should classify them as the equity and the debt? Because that particular instrument has that two options. To show that substance, we classify equity and the liability part separately in the financial statement, because it has that substance, right? Because we know that practically at the end of the period, some party will take this as the shares, some part of this instrument will take as not as shares. So anyway, based on the substance, we need to classify that in our financial statement. Okay, shall we write an answer for that? As per LK's 32, as per LK's 32, financial instrument, as per LK's 32, financial instrument need to be classified as equity or debt, based on the substance of that, transaction, substance of that transaction. Based on the substance of that transaction. Compound financial instrument contains elements of both liability and equity. Compound financial instrument contain elements of both liability and equity. In substance, this instrument will be converted into equity, based on the option attached to instrument, based on the option attached to the instrument. By following residual interest approach, it is required to measure the equity component and separately shown in the financial statements. Right? Okay. Quickly we'll look at the part B. Redeem PLC has issued 3-year 6% convertible bond at par with a face value of 100,000 and accumulated total proceed of 100 million. ඒ කියන්නේ එක convertible bond එක par value එක 100,000. හැබැයි මේගොල්ලන්ගේ total liability එක තියෙන 100 million. Each bond is convertible into 100 equity shares at any time up to maturity from the date of the issue. the managing director of the company is of the view that bond should be recognized as non-current liability. The assistant accountant of the company has performed the following calculation with regard to these bonds. Total of the face value of the bond redeemed in 3 years time 100 million. Present value of the total face value of the bond discounted at 10% is 75 million. Present value of the interest payable at 6% discounted at 10% is 14 million. And discount they have considered 10% in the prevailing market interest rate for the similar debt without conversion option. Evaluate the managing director's view on recognition of the above convertible bonds. Advise Redeem PLC as to how the above bonds should be presented in the financial statement based on the calculation given. 2 years after issuing the bonds, Redeem PLC found that likelihood of exercising conversion option is very less. Explain whether the presentation of the above bonds would be changed in the 3rd year. Marks question. Yes, shall we write the answer for each? First one, evaluate the managing director's view. Managing director says that you need to keep this as a non-current liability. Is it the managing director's comment is correct? Obvious not, because this is a compound financial instrument which has the option to convert this liability into shares at any time. Therefore, we need to separate this liability and the equity component as required by LKS 32. Therefore, we can't agree with the comment made by the managing director. Okay, right. Under the first one, shall we write? This financial instrument is a convertible bond. This financial instrument is a convertible bond which include elements of both liability and equity. As per LKS 32, based on the substance, it is required to split. Liability and the equity component based on substance. Therefore, it is required to split and disclose in the financial statements. Therefore, managing director's view, therefore the managing director's view, therefore the managing director's view on the recognition of convertible bond is not acceptable. Right? Okay. Part 2. Advise redeem PLC as how the above bond should be presented in the financial statement based on the calculation given. Yes, how we should recognize this in the financial statement. We should recognize the liability component and equity component separately, right? How to recognize that? Can you all see my Excel sheet which I opened? Let me to share it then. I hope now you can see. Right. So we'll see how we should recognize this in the financial statement. Now you all know, right? In our financial statement, the part 2 of the question asks advise redeem PLC as how to show the above a bond should be presented in the financial statement based on the calculation given. They say advice, right? Advice කියලා කිව්වට පස්සේ ඔයාලට නිකන් show නෙමෙයි. show කිව්වොත් නැත්නම් illustrate කිව්වොත් you can show it, but how you want to write it, you can write it like this way. Now the total you can take these figures. The total of the face value of this asset at the end of the 3 times is 100 millions, right? 100 million that we took, right? And from that you need to deduct present value of the total face value of the bond. හරිද? ඔයාලට මතකද අපි අර ඉස්සලම ගත්ත question එකේදීත් අපි මේක ගත්තා. මොනවද අපි ගත්තේ? right? Years අපි ගත්තා. What are the cash flows? We took the cash flows and discounting factor. Here the discounting factor at 10% is given, and also you can take the present value of these cash flows. So in this loan, they have issued this loan for 3 years, right? 1, 2, and 3 years. What are the cash flows? First year, it is a 6% convertible bond. 6% convertible bond in the sense, for this entire 100 million, you need to pay 6% interest for the first year. That is 6 million. Second year also you need to pay 6 million. Third year also you need to pay 6 million, right? And third year, other than this 6 million, right? Other than this 6 million, if you want, I will clarify it little bit more. third year, other than the this 6 million, you need to pay back this 100 million as well. Me 100 million එකත් ඔයායි ගෙවන්න ඕනේ, isn't it? Yes. When you take the total cash flows, you can see the total cash flows. How much is the total cash flows? First year it is 6 million, second year it is 6 million, and third year it is 100 million, 106 million, right? So discounting factor, we know how to get the discounting factor. Discounting factor, you can take it like this way, because they have given the discounting factor. Shall I take it? If you don't mind, shall I take this here? Then it's easy for me to show this, right? I will take this 100, right? Now it's clear, right? So here it is 6 million, right? So 6 million, 6 million, 6 million. I'm not taking this total cash flows method, right? It's a little bit complicated here, right? I'll take it like this way. So what happened in the first year, we have to pay 6 million. Second year I need to pay 6 million. Third year I need to pay 6 million, and at the end of the third year itself, I need to pay back the 100 million which I borrow from the bondholders. Now discounting factor is 10%. So you know how to get the discounting factor. 1 divided by 1.1. In the first year you can get the power as 1. So that is the discounting factor for the first year. So I will make it for 3 decimal places. And second year, how much is that? Second year it is 826. Third year it is 751, and fourth year also it's 751. Sorry, third year that is 7.751 for the entire third year. So we can take how much is this the present value of the cash flows. Here you can multiply this by the discounting factor and apply that, and you can take this total as 90 million. But in the question, look at this. In the question, they have given you the total of this interest. Present value of this interest cash flows, they have given separately. 5 million plus, 4 million plus, and 4 million separately. Plus, they have given how much is the present value of the capital. Present value of the capital is how much? It is 75,131,480. We'll see. Look at the question. See, 75,131,480. That is the present value of this capital, and 14,921,110. 2 rupees different එකක් තියෙන්නේ, right? මේකත් දීලා මේ 110යි කියලා මේ දෙකම දීලා. අපිට මේ දෙක තමයි දීලා තියෙන්නේ. මේම හැදුවත් එකයි. Question එකේ යා ටිකක් different way එකකින් දීලා. So what we should do, we should take this present value, isn't it? මේකනේ අපි කරන්න ඕනේ. හැබැයි මේ question එකේ විදිහට අපි ගන්නෙ present value of the face value of the bond is this much, and the second thing is they have given present value of the interest payable at 6%, that is they have given as 14 point this much. So අපි ඉස්සලත් කරේ මේකම තමයි. Can you remember? අපි ඉස්සලත් කරේ මේක. ඉස්සල අපි අර question එක ඉගෙන ගන්නකොට. So you want to take this total, alt plus this total, and from that you can deduct this 100 minus 90. So this 9 million is the equity component. Sorry, equity component, right? Equity component is this 9.7. So now you want to tell this, because question says you to advise, not to write the answer like me balance sheet එක පෙන්නන්න නෙමෙයි ඕනි, right? So you can elaborate that in an answer, right? Okay, shall we write the answer, right? We need to advise, so you have to write your answer as an advisor. In relation to the bond issued by Redeem PLC, in relation to the bond issued by Redeem PLC, liability and equity components. Liability and equity component should be disclosed in the financial statements. Should be disclosed in the financial statements. as follows. As follows. Now come to liability component. Subtopic liability component. How we should show that. Advice ni karane liability component. Liability component of rupees 90 million 52,592. The liability component ඔයාට ඉතින් 598. මොකද question එකේ මෙන්න මෙතනට දීලා තියෙන්නේ question එකේ මෙතනට දීලා තියෙන්නේ මෙයා මෙහෙම අරගෙනනේ 14,921,110 නේ නේද? එහෙනම් අපි එහෙමම ගමුකෝ. රුපියල් 2ක් rounding off එකක් තමයි එයා හදලා දාලා තියෙන්නේ නේද? We'll write liability component of rupees 90,52,590 which is calculated based on the nominal value of liability and interest expense discounted using discounting factor of 10%. Within bracket write down prevailing market interest rate for similar debt without conversion option. Close the bracket. Should be, close the bracket, should be recognized as non-current liability in the financial statements. In the financial statement. Next topic, write down statement of financial liability component ni අපි ලියව equity component. There you can write following the residual approach. The difference between following the residual approach, the difference between face value and the liability component. face value and the liability component. Of rupees 9,947,410 of rupees 9,947,410 9,947,410 should be recognized as equity component under the heading of other component of equity in equity statement. In equity statement. Okay, right? Okay. Now look at the final part. 2 years after issue. 2 years. Now, how long? What are the tenor of this loan? What are the tenor of this loan? How long this particular bond they have issued? Tenor? How long? Yes, it is 3 years. But now question says, at the end of, the question says, at the end of the second year, right? At the end of the second year, it looks like that the people are not going to exercise this option, right? At the end of the third year, the second year, they are saying no one is going to exercise this option. Okay, so what we should do? What we should do if they do not try to use this? Yeah, tell me. What normally we want to do if they are not going to use this option? It looks like that they are not going to use it, it seems. This is what we should do.
The equity amount should be transferred to retained earnings?
No, Puta. The reason is now we are at the end of the second year. Good try, yeah? Good try. Very good. Because we know that we are at the second year now. But this is going to be mature in third year. Still that it's, even though it's not possible. අපි මේ දෙවෙනි අවුරුද්ද ඉවරලා තමයි කියන්නේ අපිට ෂුවර් නෑ මේක ගයිද කියලා. But there's one more year. We don't know what will happen to the sentiments කියන්නේ ඒ කියන්නේ behavior of the investors. එහෙම වෙනවා හරිද? දැන් ඒ කියන්නේ දැන් අපි හිතුවද මේ මොකද්ද මේ COVID-19 කියලා එකක් ඇවිල්ලා මෙහෙම lockdown එකක් තියෙයි කියලා? No, we can't expect. So still until it get complete, I mean like until it get mature, until 3 years time, you want to continue, keep continuing. At the end of the third day, you can take this decision to transfer to the retained earnings. But that's what I told. The tenor is 3 years, but here the tenor is only we have spent 2 years. So in that case, we can't come to that conclusion, right? Okay, shall we write an answer for that? Okay. Even though there is less likelihood, even though there's less likelihood, even though there's less likelihood in exercising the option, exercising the option, redeem PLC, right? Redeem PLC. Should present liability and equity component separately, because it is not possible how the bondholders will behave in the future, right? Will behave in the future. So therefore it is not possible for us to predict. You want to keep continuing recognizing that in the financial statement as it is. Until it get mature, right? Okay, look at this. The question now. This is June 2017, question number 7. Right? Look at the question. On 1st April 2016, LP issues 5 million convertible bond that have a value of rupees 1000 per bond. Each bondholder will receive interest of 10% per bond on 31st March each year, starting on 31st March 2017. The bonds are repayable on 31st March 2026 at 1,200 per bond. As an alternative to payment, the bondholders can exchange their bond for the sales in LP. On 1st April 2016, the credit rating of LP was such that it would have been offered investors of non-convertible bond rate of return of 15% per annum for the investment. So you know that why they are giving this, that is the discounting factor. Now the question asks from you, explain to the assistant how the financial instrument mentioned in one above should be accounted for in the financial statement for the year ended 31st March 2017. There are question 7 marks. 7 marks දෙනවා කියලා කියන්නේ සාමාන්‍යයෙන් 14 minutes විතරනේ නේද? Technically we'll say 12 minutes විතර 12 minutes විතර answer එකක් තමයි ඔයා ලියා ගන්න ඕනේ. එතකොට එයාට advice කරලා කියලා දෙන්න ඕනේ. ඔයා දැන් calculate කරගන්නත් ඕනේ. එයාට advice නේ explain කරන්න තියෙන්නේ. So in order to explain, you can quickly calculate this, right? How to calculate this? We'll see. On 1st April 2016, LP issued 5 million convertible bonds. 5 million convertible bond in the sense 5 million number of bonds. One is worth 1,000 rupees. Each bondholder will receive interest of 10% on bond on 31st 31st March of each year starting on 31st March 2017. Bonds are repayable on 31st March 2026, right? 31st March 2026, say 2016 to 2026, there are 10 years. හරිද? දැන් එතකොට ඔයාට ලේසි මේක හදාගන්න ඔයාට financial knowledge එකක් ඕනේ. Financial knowledge එක කියන්නේ you should know how to calculate this no, right? පොඩි දෙයක් තියෙන. අපි කොහොමද මේකේ මෙච්චර මෙහෙම දඟලන්න දෙයක් නෑ. අපි මෙහෙම දැන් මම මේක පෙන්නන්න. දැන් first of all what do you want to see? It's a 5 million convertible bonds. Had a fair value of 1000. එතකොට ඔයා බලන්න දැන් 5 million නේ. ඒ කියන්නේ අපි ගාව තියෙනවා look at this. අපි ගත්තත් එහෙම face value of the bond, you can say face value of bond. How much the face value of the bond, which is you can see 5 million bonds, right? 5 million 1 2 3 4 5 6 multiply by one bond is equal 1000. So which means how much? 5 billions. They are taking 5 billions. Okay, 5 billions. If you want to show this in millions, or you can show that in billions, or you can show it thousands, whatever. We'll keep as it is, the 5 billion. This is the face value, right? You are receiving the interest. Then what make හදන්න උනොත් එහෙම ලේසින් හදා ගන්න පුළුවන් වෙන්න ඕනේ. හරිද? එයි මම මේක ලේසින් හදන්න පුළුවන් කියලා කියන්නේ the face value of the bond is 5 billion නේ. How much is the interest per year? Interest per year is 10% නේද? ඒ කියන්නේ 10% interest, which is 500 million. That's how the question says, right? We'll receive interest of 10%. Interest of 10% they are receiving, right? Interest of 10%. 5 million convertible bond at 1000. 5 million convertible bond at 1000. They are receiving interest at 10%. දැන් ඔයාට කැල් එක ගහලා දැන් අපි හිතමුකෝ exam එකේදී ඔයාට නෑ මොනවද? Excel එකක් නේද? Excel එකේ හදනවා නම් මේක ලේසි. Now you know that we issue the bond on 1st April 2016, which is going to mature in 31st March 2026. එතකොට first year එක වෙන්නේ 2017, second year is first year is 2017, second year is 2018, right? Second year is 2018, 2018, then 2019, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25, 26, right? 10 years will be the tenor of this loan. So you need to pay cash flows. නේද? මේකට cash flow එකක් ගෙවන්න ඕනි කොහොමද? interest එක විදිහට ඔයා ගෙවන්න ඕනි 500 million. 500 million pay කරන්න ඕනි for each of these 10 years. Sorry for that, right? Pay special I give. Right? You need to pay 500 million interest for each year. And on 2026 again you need to give the amount redeemed value. So you can see, look at this, the bond are repayable, look at this, right? The bonds are repayable on 31st March 2026 at 1200 per bond. At maturity you need to pay a premium, right? So at maturity you are not going to pay 500 billion. You issued 5 million bonds, no? 5 million bonds into 1200 you need to pay. That means at maturity you need to pay 6 billions. 1 2 3 4 5 6 7 8 9 digits. 6 billion you need to pay. Now you want to get the present value of this. How to get the present value? The discounting factor they are giving it as 15%. So you can take 1 divided by 1.15 to the power of 1. I will take it like this. Years now. 1 2 3 4 5 6 7 8 9 and 10 years. then it's easy for me to do the formula in Excel, right? So I can give this one at the formula, right? So you should know about the formulas as well. Into 3 digits I will take it, and when I'm dragging down, so these are the discounting factors. So you can take the this into 870, and this is how you want to take the present value of the liability, right? The present value of the liability is 3.9 billion. So 3.9 billion. So how much is the face value of the bond, which is 5 billion? From this 5 billion, right, from this 5 billion, you deduct this 3 billion. So the balance 1.1 billion you need to recognize as the equity. Then මෙහෙම හදන්නත් පුළුවන්. Excel එකක් තියෙන්න එපයි මෙච්චර ඉක්මනට හදාගන්න. නැත්තම් ඔයාලට පුළුවන් අර PVIA factor එක දන්නවනේ නේද? You can quickly do the PVIA factor නේද? Take your calculator. You know what the formula 1 minus 1 divided by 1 plus r to the power of n. If you apply that particular formula, you can take this 500 million into that number. You can take the present value easily නේද? මොකද කැල් එකකින් ඔයාලට හොයාගන්න පුළුවන් නේ. කැල් එකකින් විනාඩියෙන් ගන්න පුළුවන් නේද? You know the formula is here. If I write the formula here, the formula is 1 minus 1 divided by 1 plus r, right, to the power of n, this entire answer divided by r, right? So this is how you want to calculate the PVIE factor. Now you know r is 15%. If you make it decimal, it's 0.15. You add 1 to that, then 1.15. Power of n is 10. So you can easily type it, calculate using the calculator, 1.15 into power of 10 and get the answer. 1 divide answer, 1 minus answer, and that entire answer divided by 0.15. Then you can easily calculate and get this answer. But that answer, that particular will take you an answer of 5.019. You can multiply this by only 500 million. Then you are getting the present value of these cash flows, that is 2.5 billion. And you know that after 10 years you need to pay 6 billion. You want to get the present value of that. So discount, use the discounting factor 15% and divide it into the power of 10 and get the present value of that. So total you can take easily, and the difference of this 5 million and this 3 billion, you can consider that as the equity component. Understood? You can consider that as the equity component. So this is how you want to quickly give an answer. To calculate this, I think it will take only 2 minutes to do the calculation, right? And thereafter you want to manage your answer within next 10 minutes, right? So you want to advise how to recognize. So I'm not going to give you the detailed answer now, since you know the answer, how to get the answer. Now you know what we want to do. You want to split equity component and the debt component. Equity component will be this much. You can do the calculation quickly, and this much, and this is the present value of the cash flows, and the difference you want to recognize as equity, right? So that should be your answer for this part. Clear, right? So that's how you want to give the answer, and that is that question. And look at this. You can see in 2017 December question also the same. Alloy PLC issued 600 convertible bond on 1st March 2017. These bonds have 3-year term and were issued at par with the face value of 100 per bonds, which was the fair value. The convertible bonds are redeemable at par. Interest is payable annually in arrears at nominal interest rate of 8%. Each 100 bonds of the convertible bought at any time up to into 25 ordinary shares. When the bonds were issued, the prevailing market interest rate is 10%. assess the liability and equity component of the above investment in the initial recognition. Initial recognition එකේ value එක කීයක් වෙන්න ඕනද? It gives you 6 marks. See how easy, right? And you can try those. I'm not going to give you. You can double check the answers with the institute has published the answers. You can double check that answers. And this is a different one. So here also the same, right? Which is in December 2017 question. Right. Okay. So this is technically earnings per share question. And also there's one last question in June 2019. So in the June 2019 question, they're saying there's a convertible bond. On 1st April 2018, Aeron issued 30 million 12% convertible bond at par value of rupees 100. Interest is payable annually in arrears. The terms of the conversion are that for every par value of 100 of bond, 50 ordinary shares will be issued. Alternatively, the bond will be redeemed on 1st April 22 at par for cash. The credit rating of the company, which suggests that the interest rate is 15%, right? That is for the discounting purpose. So calculate, advise appropriate accounting treatment in the convertible bond in the initial recognition. So you know how to get that. You want to get the present value of the liability, and you want to get the present value of present value of the liability. And from the nominal value, you deduct the present value. That difference you should recognize as the equity. See, that's what I told. It has been tested so many times in your exam paper. But I don't think that there is a difficult part or difficult area